Hi, and welcome to another demo of RESTpoint. Today, in most of our other demos, we used our user interface to create APIs. Today, we're just going to use the API to build an API and deploy it. So it's kind of funny, an API to build an API. But let's get through it. So we're going to start with, we're going to list our projects. And in order to start sending requests to RESTpoint, you would log into your API, click on the Me button, and that would give you your API key. And then under authorization, you would just put in your X API key and put it in here. I have my API key in a Postman environment. You could just put your API key in, whatever works. So we'll start with, we'll just do a fetch to get all the projects, and you'll see we have all our projects in here, the same list that would appear in here. If I was to look, there's all our projects, same ones we see here. So we're going to start with creating a project, and for this demo we'll create a contact list. So we want to just create an API where we can add contacts and keep notes. So to create a project, we're just going to run a post on the sandbox projects, and we're going to call this contacts API with a description example of creating an API for contacts. So I'm going to click on the project, and now I will grab my project ID, and I'm going to move that forward. So we now have a project created, and we're going to make the API call. But first, we're going to define what a contact is, and that's called a resource. And we're going to come in, and for where I have ID here, I'm going to paste that in. So we're now going to create a resource for a contact. So I already have this pasted in. You'll see it's pretty straightforward. I'm going to drag this down a touch. And you'll see that we have 3 fields, name and an email. So we're keeping it kind of simple, type and this and required. So this will define our resource, because when we say give our list of contacts, this is what we'll return. So I'm going to create a resource, and you'll see there is my response here that the contact is created, and it added some other metadata there that we can use later on, default values, properties like that. So now we are going to create our path, which is our first path, and we want it to be, and I'm going to get rid of this part here and put in the ID for the project. So we're going to create a path in the project, and the name of the path is going to be contacts, and our resource is the contact that we just created. You'll see that was our name, contact. So when we end up deploying this API, it'll be, our API call will be /contacts. We could keep the slash in there to make it simple. It's removed at the back when we do this, but the path is, let's say it's /contacts, and it's going to return a resource called contact. So I'm going to call that a post to create the path. And there's our path, and you'll see there's the resource, which is a contact, and the ID. We'll talk about JSON and the actions later, but we'll be able to say what actions our path supports. So when we create a path, that could be contacts, or in the future it could be contacts backslash, the ID backslash accounts. It could be any of these. We can have long paths, and for a path it contains collections, and that's what contains our data. So you'll see in the links here we have collections. So let me grab my path here, and I'm going to get my collection for this path. So you'll see my path is this, and I'm going to get my project. We probably could take advantage of Postman environment for this, but we'll we'll sort of add these in for now so you see what we're doing. Nothing magic. So we are going to say, give me the collections. So you see this, there is our collection, and that maps to the that maps to the path. It is a reference to the path in there. So now to get my data, we have one more to go here. What we'll do is we'll add, let's grab this since we have this, and I'm going to add that into the collection, and then I'm going to say give me the data or the items in that collection. Alright, and there we see there's name, email, and notes is in one item is in there. If I want to add another item, let's grab this, and I have an item set up here. So what we'll do here is add a new contact into our list. So I'm going to go to the body, and I'm going to copy this information out. And we'll get rid of this. So what I'll call this is John Doe, and we'll say jdoe@email.com, and notes, hello. And I'm going to do a post because I want to post this information into that collection. So a path has many collections. So our data is entered, and there's the data that returns. So if I want to see all that data again, I can come here and you'll see there's our John Doe, and there's our first one from the first, when we created a path, we create one. Okay, so we now have the collection with both items in it. Let's now deploy our API to the cloud. So I'm going to take the project ID, and I'm now going to create an endpoint in. So now I'm going to post the endpoint. So for this project, I'm going to post the endpoint, and the name is going to be called Contacts API. A description is example of creating an API for the comments, and our base path is API. So when I post this, this will take all the metadata from our project and create a real backend and API in the cloud that we can then start using as a real API. And well, it copies the data. It goes into the project and by default copies all the paths and the data for the paths into the new API. That's configurable, but we'll keep it simple right now. So we'll post in the endpoint, and there is our endpoint. Let's move this up a touch if we can. And so you'll see it is now a deployed endpoint. I'm going to take this full access token, and I believe I have this set up here. So API contacts. So you see now this is a real deployed API in the cloud, and I'm going to, for my authorization, I'm going to change this to be endpoint key. So anytime we deploy an endpoint, we're going to put this in here. And now I'll be able to fetch my contacts, which is a real deployed endpoint. And it's getting set up and should be coming out here. Okay, there we go. So you see, this is a real API now that you can give over to any of your contacts. You can post, you can do any credit actions. It's a real API. These are the available access keys. So if you want users to be able to create and remove anything, you give them this. If you only want to give them read access to the data, give them that. There's various different tokens. So there is our API now available. I can post and put, patch any to our contacts like it's a real API. Now to go back to our UI, now we'll now reload this and we will see that there is our contacts API we just created. There's our one path. And you'll see if we look at our resource, we'll see, oh, let's do that again. Come into our contacts API. You'll see that we can go to our contact and it's name, email, notes. We can come in, you'll see the data we had in there to begin with. The two items we had, and there is our endpoint, which we already showed. We already made this call to our contacts. And then, of course, anything else, now that we've made our API, if we want to see what it looks like in OpenAPI to have automated documentation, we can paste this, and you'll see there's our contacts, and these are all calls we can make. So this concludes our demo on building an API with an API. Thank you.